Hey there peeps, today we're going to be revisiting a weapon that I've reviewed in the past. Why, you may ask? I believe that this weapon is in dire need of a rehaul, in how it performs in today's sandbox. Launcher, Ranger's powerhouse weapon, as I've once called it before. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Well, let's just say that this weapon has definitely fallen pretty hard in how it feels to use as a standalone weapon. You could say it's become a shell of its former self. Many of the new enemies we face today are well adapted to combating us ranged players effectively, so it's best we take this hunk of metal back to the armory for some well needed upgrades and enhancements. Alrighty, let's see what we can do. Launcher has always been infamously known for dealing high damage, but at the cost of low mobility. It thrives at long range as well as possessing strong AoE capabilities for tightly grouped enemies. This has been the weapon's identity ever since PSO2. It retains its supportive role greatly. With the use of Divine Impact, Fallen Impact, and Fair Eraser, it can achieve a good balance of dishing out superb damage against a single target at range, or dealing massive damage against grouped enemies. Some of the main things that it does slightly better than Ranger's other class weapon Rifle consists of stacking great burst damage when combining PAs, slightly better targeting against weak spots for scenarios with faster moving targets, and the ability to deal heavy knockbacks against enemies with a single blast of Divine Impact. Unfortunately, that's pretty much all it really does to outshine as a standalone weapon. However, it still works exceptionally well when used as a multi-weapon with Rifle for the full Ranger experience. Moving into some of the cons of this weapon will be pretty easy to identify when you test it out in gameplay. It's still very punishing to use with various animation locks, and with the startup delays on some attacks, it pretty much doesn't feel too good to use in close range combat scenarios. The weapon mostly feels like you're forced into using it at an extremely long range, which does work, mind you. But when it comes to anything solo related, you start to realise where the faults lie. Even after the many buffs that this weapon has received over the years, it still feels like it's being held back by the exaggeration on low mobility. Let's dive a little more into how this weapon performs in party play. Launcher definitely does have a place in terms of team-orientated quests, especially with the ability to barrage enemies from afar with the use of the multi-launch PA. The launcher attack reinforced skill can also come in handy in this scenario. The problems that lie within close range combat is usually nullified by simply not being up close. However, if the enemy decides to target you whilst you're admiring a battle from afar, your teammates will definitely be getting a cardio workout in, that's for sure. Meanwhile, you'll be dealing with the pain of being up close. You see where I'm coming from? Do you see where the problem lies? Okay, it's not all bad, there are things in place to help with this. For example, Stealth Strike. This skill is very mandatory for Launcher. Reducing your threat level will allow you to be less likely to be targeted by enemies. You will also be able to deal more damage against bosses not targeting you with the skill known as Long Range Advantage. These skills were clearly made for each other with how great they synergize together. Okay, enough with the skills, I need to save some of this for my Ranger guide later. So be sure to subscribe, or you may just miss it. Now, let us analyse how this weapon works in solo environments. It is pretty fun, if you like the challenge, but it can also be very frustrating to deal with, as bosses tend to not let you attack them from a distance in solo. I personally love the challenge of adapting to using a weapon despite all of its negatives, but Launcher just feels way too restrictive in too many scenarios, especially revisiting the problems mentioned earlier with close range. The damage is definitely great when you can successfully pull off a solid burst damage rotation. However, you have to heavily rely on timings and positioning in order to not get hit, or to take advantage of guard frames on PAs. A lot of times you may find that you can't utilise the full PA, and may need to cancel them with sidesteps early. Unfortunately, this is not a very appealing gameplay loop to undergo in solo. If you're interested, here is one of my Duel Quest runs only using Launcher. If not, feel free to skip ahead to this timestamp on screen.
The Joker card. Come on like the night. Rainy battle, respect the show. It's like ding ding, ring the bell. Pumping a buck, be mean as hell. In that zone, no need to think. Believe yourself, don't hesitate. Let those insects act cool. Get up, now get down. Step up, now step down. Get up, now get down. Step up and down. Believe yourself, don't hesitate. Let those insects act the fool. Believe yourself, don't hesitate. Let those insects act the fool. All for the other one, single fold. All out together, how we must go. Find a way and let it know. These are the times we're saving for. Things are not all as it seems. Still to the battle now we must go. One for the other one, single fold. All out together, how we must go. None can go just on its own. One for another and all for all. Find a way and let it know. These are the times we're saving for. Get on, come on, let's get down. On again, let's get up. Be up to be on the run. In order for better days. A lot to be still won. All light up, neon light. Light tonight, stars light. Be the night, come out to fight. A lot to be still won. All light up, neon light. These are the times we're saving for. Neon lights up now, come show us the way. Let it brighten up and take us all away.
The gameplay loop may not be appealing for solo, but there are many different weapon camos which are appealing. Here are some of my favorites. Yasminikov 4000F, Jean's Shotgun, Gunblazer Marty, Tisaworth Marty, Quantum Z Imperial, Neos Astrian Marty Color Variant. How can this weapon improve? That's the main question. A few changes and improvements I'd personally like to see for launcher will be the following. Remove animation locks for all PAs but slightly reduce the damage to compensate. Add better tracking for sidestep attacks and sidestep counters. Launcher attack reinforced speed bonus also applies to PAs. Refine some of the animations for a better fluid feel. Launcher attack short charge damage penalty reduced to 5% from 15%. Add a cooldown reduction on successful sidesteps by 10 seconds for the skill Sticky Bomb Quick Reload. On a side note, the addition of the tech arts customization is also a step in the right direction for improvements. Fallen Impact tech arts options are great examples on how a weapon can improve exactly how you want them to. I feel like these changes can help Launcher achieve the status that it deserves. A potent boomstick wielded by the strongest of guardians. The focus on shaping it into a much more fun weapon to use in general is very needed as the game world combat expands. Anyways, that'll be enough for this review. As a short recap, Launcher retains its power, but has little ways in applying it safely in close range. It still feels very sluggish and outdated in the current times, with how restricted the movement is on most of its kit. Overall, I'll give it a 5 out of 10 for solo play, and a 7 out of 10 for party play. I appreciate you watching this far. The new year of 2024 is upon us, so I wish all of you a new year of greatness. If you enjoyed this video, or found it useful, let me know by leaving a like and commenting. Subscribe if you'd like to see more from me, and as always, take it easy peeps.